Hello there, Veeks. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. I hope that I am. But okay, so it's nice to meet you video wise. What I'm going to do here is I am going to start out by pulling up your chart and kind of do something similar what I did for your daughter. I'll probably just go into a little bit more detail for yourself here. So what we're looking at here is what is basically described as a snapshot of the tropical zodiac at the time of your birth based on your location. And the way it works is it's like I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, that means we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. Okay, so you would be right here. And this is literally as if somebody just went out and took a picture of where all the celestial bodies were around you when you took your first breath of air. And according to real traditional Western astrology, or really any form of astrology, it's like this is your blueprint. This is what some people describe as your permanent planetary resonance imprint. This is the thing that does not change. Okay, we go through transits, we go through progressions, we go through zodiacal releasing, we do go through all sorts of things to help us evolve throughout life. And so we do sort of progress or evolve through this chart, but this is always going to be our imprint. And it's like these symbols right here, these little things that are on the outer part of the wheel, those are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies. Okay, like here's Neptune and here's the moon, here's Uranus, here's Pluto, here's Saturn. When we go in the wheel just a little ways, these things right here are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these planets and celestial bodies were beaming through when you took your first breath of air. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by talking about the three most significant parts of the chart, which are the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. And your sun, I'm going to have to bring in some other planetary activity when I talk about your sun, because there's a lot of conjunctions going on there. You'll understand what I mean when I get to that. But okay, so after I go through the sun, moon, and rising, I'm going to go through each one of these things that looks like a slice of pie. I don't know if you saw your daughter's recording, so I'm going to describe this in detail as if you have no idea what you're looking at here and you've never seen anything like it before. I'm going to go through each one of these things that looks like a slice of pie. Those are called the houses, but what they really are is they represent areas of our life where things manifest. So I'll go through each one of those and talk about the energy that manifests through there. I'll point out like the most prominent aspects. When I say aspects, what I'm talking about are these lines that go through the middle of the chart. Basically, what they are is like connections that were being made between celestial bodies and zodiacal points when you took your first breath of air. Just as an example here, I think your strongest one is this right here is Jupiter. I like this aspect right here. This right here is Jupiter, where I'm moving my mouse. And this right here is Neptune, where I'm moving my mouse. We can see this blue line that goes from here to here. That's called a trine. All these things are calculated through geometry. Those blue lines, the trines, are approximately 120-degree angle. And what they mean is that those planets were having a harmonious conversation at the time of your birth. And that's a really, really nice one between Neptune and Jupiter. Those are both our friends, meaning Neptune and Jupiter, for the most part, really do bring good things into our life. And then I think I will take a little bit of time to talk about transits that you're specifically going through right now. There's some things that look a little bit heavy, but nothing too crazy. But I definitely would at least would like to point out some things that are going on for you right now and maybe kind of unfolding over the next few years, that sort of thing. And I do have a tendency to give a lot of detailed information. So just follow along as best as you can. If there's anything that goes over your head, don't even worry about it. That's why the recording is so helpful, because then you can come back and watch it again later. I always think of it as like, you know, the first time you watch a movie, it's very different the second time you watch it. There's always going to be something that you, oh, I didn't notice that the first time I saw the movie. So that's very helpful with it for the recording. Okay, so I'm looking, there's a tiny, tiny little spider that just landed on my computer, and I'm just going to let it go. Just going to let it be there. Okay, hi, little guy. All right, so this right here is the symbol for the sun, and this right here is the symbol for the sign of Leo. Okay, now The sun, that's our inner being and our sense of identity. And it's like who we are on the inside. And the sign of Leo, I mean, hands down, it's got to be my favorite sign of the zodiac because it's ruled by the sun. Like every zodiac sign is ruled by either one or two planets or celestial bodies. And the sun rules the sign of Leo. So that said, when the sun up in the sky is transiting through the sign of Leo, it's like the sun is in his own home. He gets to function the way he wants to. That's why the sign of Leo is considered like the leader of the zodiac. It's a very playful and courageous energy. Okay, it really has a lot to do with energy. It tends to have really good vitality as well because it's what we call the fixed fire sign. When I say fixed, what I'm talking about is an ability to get into a rhythm of something. Okay, here, well, I'm going to start this routine and I'm going to stick with it. Sometimes it can be difficult where somebody, if they have a lot of fixed energy in their chart, which you do, but you've also got some adaptability as well. But there goes that spider. I wish I could show it to you, but I'd take apart my computer if I did that. Anyway, you have some adaptability as well. But I would say that it might be difficult for you to change routines abruptly because the fixed signs, your sun and your moon are both in fixed signs, meaning you like things to get into a rhythm and stick with that. Okay, so when I talk about the element of fire, all the fire signs are very strongly associated with energy. Okay, they tend to have the greatest energy. And Leo, what's nice about Leo out of the other, okay, so the fire signs are Leo, Sagittarius, and Aries. Aries is cardinal fire, meaning forceful fire, and it will overexert itself. Sagittarius is mutable fire, meaning very, very adaptable fire. And it's kind of, my teacher calls it wildfire, the sign of Sagittarius, and has a difficult time being able to hold that energy in. Leo being fixed fire, that's why it tends to have really good longevity and vitality because it can hold the energy in being in the fixed fire. Okay. Now, also, the sign of Leo, the motto for the sign of Leo is I will. It comes with incredible willpower. Leo's represented by the lion, which is the lion's considered the king or the queen of the zodiac. Okay, so Leo is considered the king of the zodiac. Again, being ruled by the sun. When you think about the sun, and it's obviously the brightest light in the sky, the sign of Leo tends to just be a bright, shiny light. Okay, but also the sun that kind of has like a crown. Okay, the crown that comes off of the sun that also is very much applied to the sign of Leo being the king of the zodiac, or again, the queen of the zodiac. Okay, so that's your inner being. But when you were born, what was going on here is, okay, so there's the sun. Hopefully you're watching this on a computer. I'll leave that message in the email or in the Instagram message that it would be best for you to download this onto a computer. When people try to watch it on their phone, sometimes it could be just too difficult to see. Anywho, when you were born, here's the sun, very, very close to the sun. This right here is Mercury, which Mercury rules over our mental function and our communication skills. Mercury rules our nervous system. We all have Mercury somewhere in our natal chart. Whatever zodiac sign the Mercury was beaming through when we were born is going to say a lot about our mental function and our communication skills. So with that said, let's say anybody who's born with Mercury in the sign of Leo, they can tend to have almost playful thoughts, energetic but playful and courageous thoughts. The mind tends to work with some stability, but it also, sort of metaphorically speaking here, runs hot. Okay, the sign of Leo is the hottest sign of the zodiac. For most of us in the world, Leo is the hottest time of year between late January and the first couple weeks of August. But so if you think about the ruler, Mercury works like this. You know, you're constantly receiving information. We're all constantly receiving information. You're receiving information right now as you're listening to me talk. And Mercury takes that information in and files it away somewhere into our consciousness. And then when we want to communicate that information, Mercury goes in and finds that file and brings it back out for us to communicate. So again, with that said, that ruler of your mental function and your communication skills coming to the sign of Leo is very strong. But what's really interesting is when you were born, so the sun and Mercury were pretty darn close together here. Okay, they're about 3 degrees away from each other. Your sun is at 9 degrees Leo, your Mercury is at 6 degrees Leo. They're both in the first decan of the Leo energy, meaning it's kind of purified Leo energy, but they're blending together. When any two zodiacal points or planets or whatever they are right next to each other in the natal chart, it's very, very similar to if somebody's holding a flashlight here and they're holding another flashlight here. The closer that those flashlights are together, it basically just becomes one brighter light. Okay, they blend together and work as one. So we've got the ruler of the mental function blending in with the ruler of your inner being and your sense of identity, coming through this very courageous sign of Leo. But also what was fairly close to Mercury and also fairly close to your sun, this right here is Venus. Okay, now you can see Venus was about 3 degrees away from Mercury and about 6 degrees away from your sun. So they're kind of all blending together. I'd say your sun and Mercury are the strongest connection, but Venus is there as well. So Venus is sometimes referred to as the planet of love. Venus is the influencer of love and beauty and harmony and everybody getting along. And Venus, of course, everybody has a Venus somewhere in their natal chart, and whatever zodiac sign Venus was beaming through when we were born is going to say a lot about what we're attracted to. It's going to say a lot about how we show our love, how we give our love, that sort of thing. And so with that said, Venus is almost kind of calming down. I'll put it to you this way. If Venus wasn't there, if it was just Mercury and the sun right next to each other in your chart, you might almost have an overstimulated mind. But with Venus there, she's almost kind of taking that down a notch. She's almost kind of soothing that for you. But I would say that you are probably very, very loyal. We're going to get into your rising sign shortly here. Your Gemini rising, which can make things a little... well, it's a sign of duality, but your inner being, I'd say, is incredibly, almost like passionately loyal. Leo actually rules the heart. Like all the zodiac signs rule different parts of our body. And the main part of our body that Leo rules is the heart. So a lot of people who have their Venus in Leo just love so big with their heart, wide open, that sort of thing. And not only that, but I'll point this out too, even though they're not quite considered conjunct, a little bit. This right here is the sun again, and this right here is Jupiter that was fairly close to the sun. Not nearly as close as Mercury and Venus, but fairly close. Jupiter, whatever Jupiter touches, Jupiter makes it, boom, a bigger deal. Jupiter is the great expander, okay? So this is a lot of very, very strong Leo energy coming through here. I feel like for the most part, you probably have a pretty big personality. You were born in the evening. You were born at, hopefully I have that right. Yeah, I had you down for 2:25 a.m. In, I don't know how to pronounce that, but some part of Hawaii. And when somebody's, basically the way this works, just so you kind of have an idea as to what's going on here, this is kind of like the horizon. That if I was to draw a line, a horizontal line that went from here over to here, a line that went like that, that would be the horizon. And anything below that line would be under Earth, okay? Anything above that line would be up in the sky, kind of visible, okay? And when people are born, when the sun at the bottom of the chart, they tend to be a little more introverted. Basically, when somebody's born at night, that means that the sun was underneath us. So here you are being born, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the sun's under Earth. And so I don't think you're the typical crazy extroverted Leo. Some Leos, especially with all this Leo energy in their natal chart, like if all this, your Venus, your sun, your Mercury, your Jupiter, all Leo were up here, you would probably never be able to get off the stage. You would probably, I feel like you'd, I don't know, be a drummer in some band or something, like the lead drummer of some big band. I don't know, something along those lines. I say drummer because drummers can hold a beat. I mean, of course, most musicians can hold a beat, but the drummers, the fixed signs tend to do really well with drums. Anywho, because you were born at night, that brings the energy in a little bit. I don't think you're somebody who like starves for attention, which some Leos can. but I think it's a little bit more like you're okay with getting the attention. I feel like you in some parts enjoy that, and you can take a compliment. You love a compliment, that sort of thing. But again, very loyal, very courageous, and probably pretty playful as well. Okay, now the next thing I'll talk about is your moon, which is right here. This right here is the symbol for the moon. And this right here is the symbol for the sign of Scorpio. So what that means is when you were born, the moon was beaming through the sign of Scorpio. So the moon, she rules our emotions and our moods and our intuition. The moon is like the mother of the heavens. And if, again, of course, everybody's got a moon somewhere in their natal chart, whatever zodiac sign the moon was beaming through when we were born, it's going to say a lot about how we process our emotions and our level of receptivity and our intuition. Okay. Now, the sign of Scorpio is very intense. Okay. It is the most intense sign of the zodiac. It's the scorpion that can have a lethal pinch. It's what we call the fixed water sign. So that's what I'm talking about. You got all this fixed Leo energy over here, and your moon is fixed as well. Kind of close to Uranus. I'll bring that up. But so with that said, even though I think for the most part, I'm circling over here, we're talking about the optimism and like want to enjoy life. Leo wants to enjoy life. That's the ultimate goal for the sign of Leo, is to enjoy life. But there's some really, really intense emotions that come through with the sign of Scorpio, especially moon in Scorpio. Really all the water signs. And by the way, where you see red, okay, you see how this is all as Leo energy and it's red right here? That's to show us that that's a fire sign, okay? Where it's blue right here, that means it's a water sign. Again, fire signs are associated with energy. Water signs are all about emotions. Water is basically emotions in astrology. And so the moon already rules our emotions, and your moon's coming through a water sign, the most intense water sign. So it's really, it's like, I feel like for the most part, you're probably a really strong person. I get the feeling that you in certain ways can be very strong, like in an argument, that sort of thing could really hold your ground with all this fixed. Leo's very strong, Scorpio's very strong because they're both fixed. Scorpio is definitely the strongest of the water signs. It's debatably the most powerful sign, which is very interesting. So powerful emotions come through with moon in Scorpio. And I guess I'm going to point this out. Here, this right here is Uranus, which Uranus was about 8 degrees away from the moon when you were born. So that's a loose conjunction. They're fairly close, but not like your Mercury and your sun. The closer things are together, the more they're going to blend together and work as one. And these guys, they're close enough to want to blend together a little bit. So I might as well mention it. So Uranus is actually exalted in the sign of Scorpio. The reason for it, when I say exalted, means it works with its greatest strength. This is because Uranus wants to influence a revolution. Uranus, we all have Uranus somewhere in our natal chart, and wherever Uranus is in somebody's natal chart, it will kind of show where things will come as a surprise, things that are almost unexplainable, things that are a little unpredictable, okay? But once a revolution, that's Uranus's job. That's why Uranus throws surprises at us, is because you can't have a revolution without something being coming as a little bit shocking. Okay, Uranus is very shocking. And here we have the sign of Scorpio, which is the sign of Scorpio is actually the sign of transformation. I mean, really, really, you want to level out the emotional stuff. And what I don't mean emotional, like you're going to sit in your room and weep and cry. It's more like just feeling things so, so, so intensely. And the way to get through that with this Scorpio moon conjunct Uranus is to go through the transformational process. Allow for those super heavy emotions to come through. Allow for them, because as long as, you're not, say, going into some form of escapism, as something where it's like some people, certainly not talking about you here, but some people who, if they have these really, really intense emotions, they'll go into some form of, maybe mind altering substances or something that I guess just some form of escapism, alcohol or something along those lines, which, I'm not somebody who's says you should never ever drink alcohol. It's just obviously we're not using it as some sort of a vice. As long as you're not doing that, as long as you're like sitting there going, like sitting in some form of meditation, you could probably meditate really deeply with with these placements, but allowing for those really heavy emotions to come in and go through the core, go through your system and flush them out. That's how Scorpio gets its power. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, well, and Mars, but Pluto's job is to create a transformational process. And it does that by flushing things out, by flushing it out to create room for a new empowered beginning. That's what the sign of Scorpio is all about. And so it's like the revolutionary transformational process with your emotions. Okay. So I hope that was probably a little bit difficult to really make sense of, but that's just the way that I see it. It's a powerful placement. It's like a blend of this Leo energy. Just want to have fun, just want to enjoy life, right? But then there's just a lot of intensity in there as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there, at least for now. Now let's move on to what is called your rising sign. So this right here, I'm using something called a whole sign house system. There's other forms of astrology, other house systems, all sorts of interesting things that we could look at. I think I'm probably going to stick with this system the whole time. And if you have questions about, you want to go deeper, there's other house systems that I can show you. But this is, I feel like, especially for your first, astrology session, it's probably best if I simplify it. So using the whole sign house system, this right here is the symbol for the rising sign. Okay, it's that circle with a horizontal line. And really what that represents is the horizon. Okay, it's like I said, the horizon is basically a line that goes across the chart here. This is too much for me to really get into the details, but this thing right here is representing what part of the zodiac was on the horizon when you took your first breath of air. It's a very, very important part of the chart. Debatably, the most important part of the chart. And it's, when I talk about this rising sign, it's also called the ascendant. And what it really does rule over is our persona, okay? Our outward expression, the way that other people see us, but also the way that we see other people, the way that we see the world. In fact, sometimes the rising sign is even referred to as the lens, like the lens that we're seeing this whole experience through. It's often referred to as the persona, which persona sort of means mask in Latin. And the only thing I don't like about that description is that it makes the rising sign sound like, when I say mask, that it's like separate, or it's something that's phony that's on the face, which the horizon or the rising sign is not phony. It really is the lens. And it's very, very important. So when you were born, what was on the horizon, what was rising up, was a sign of Gemini. Okay, so this gives you the sign of Gemini is very fun. It's what we call the mutable air sign. And when I say mutable, now we're talking about adaptability. So your sun and your moon are both fixed. Okay. In fact, if you look over here, let me expand this for a moment. You can see here, you've got 9 fixed placements. You've got 1 cardinal placement. That's really interesting. And 6 mutable. So cardinal means source. Fixed means, I want this to be fixed. I don't want this to be bouncing all over the place. I want it to be stable. Mutable means being able to adapt into new situations, that sort of thing. And you do have quite a bit of mutable, but I'd say for the most part, you're pretty fixed. Okay, but what's great is that your rising sign is mutable. Your persona, your outward expression, your lens is mutable. Adaptability, okay? Especially in the element of air. Right here where we see it's yellow, okay? Again, where it was red down here, that's the sign of Leo. Over here it was blue for water for Scorpio. Over here it's yellow, meaning it's an air sign. Gemini is an air sign. All the air signs are associated with intellect. The motto for the sign of Gemini is I think. Okay, it's a highly intellectual energy, but it's also the sign of communication. I kind of think of the sign of Gemini as a little bit whimsical. It's very fun. It's another one that can be really good at again, the sign of communication. It can be really good at being sociable as long as there's nothing seriously like counteracting that energy. I think you're probably a fairly sociable person. But again, I don't see you as somebody who just is always out there trying to be the center of attention. I see you as somebody who can manage yourself well in social settings, especially with a Gemini rising, the sign of communication. But it's the sign of duality. Okay, it's almost like two approaches to life, seeing something this two totally different ways at the exact same time. That's what Gemini energy does. Okay, it's represented by the twins. Can also be associated with siblings. Now, whatever planet and the reason I say planet or celestial body is because technically the sun and the moon are not planets in real traditional astrology. They're just referred to as lights. Okay. And so they're just certainly not all planets. But whatever celestial body or planet rules somebody's rising sign, what that means is that planet or celestial body is the captain of their ship. Okay, so what rules Gemini is Mercury. So Mercury is the captain of your ship in this lifetime. And what that means is that Mercury in your natal chart, which is right here, is going to be a major theme throughout your life. Also means that whatever Mercury is doing up in the sky is going to have a very strong influence on you. Like say, for example, when Mercury goes retrograde, it might have a stronger influence on you than it would with other people who are not a Gemini rising or don't have Mercury as the captain of their ship. Mercury is such a fascinating character or archetype to study. In Greek mythology, Mercury is Hermes Trismegistus, who is the supposed author of the Emerald Tablet, okay, the messenger of the gods. Hermes is a very important character to understand. It's if you ever study any kind of Hermeticism, which is absolutely fascinating to study, there's a book called The Kybalion. The Kybalion is a really great book, but that's what you're doing when you're studying that stuff is you're studying Mercury. You're studying the messages from the gods. Okay, that's what Mercury's job is. Also in Norse mythology, Mercury is Odin. Okay, who's also a messenger of the gods. And in Egyptian mythology, Mercury is Thoth, which is also a messenger of the gods. And that's why Mercury is so incredibly fascinating to me. Mercury rules over the entire nervous system. Okay, so that messenger of the gods is the captain of your ship. And that is part of the reason why I was saying that this conjunction between the sun and Mercury when you were born is so strong. Even though it's about the same, like this, your sun is at 9 degrees Leo, Mercury is at 6 degrees Leo, Venus is at 3 degrees Leo. So if we know how to do math, we can see that there's about a 3-degree difference between Venus and Mercury here. And there's also about a 3-degree difference between Mercury and the sun here. But the connection with the sun and Mercury is, in my very strong opinion, it's going to be stronger because you're what I would describe as mercurial. Okay. And it's, again, Mercury is kind of almost a little bit of a whimsical energy. Okay. Mercury is absolutely fascinating to study and to research. Okay. Now moving forward. Okay. This right here, again, this right here is the symbol for the rising sign. Everybody's rising sign comes through this right here, this little slice of pie right here, where all that Gemini energy is. That's the first house for everybody. It doesn't matter whose natal chart you're looking at. It doesn't matter what house system you're using. This is always where the first house lands, and it's the house of self. Okay, so if you ever hear an astrologer talking about, oh, new moon in Gemini, or, Jupiter just moved into Gemini, something along those lines, whatever it is, if they're talking about the sign of Gemini, for you specifically, that means that that energy is manifesting through your house of self, your first house. Okay. And everybody's rising sign comes through the first house. Like if you, let's say you were a Sagittarius rising, then the sign of Sagittarius would be right in this spot. And there would be that little circle right there. And it would be the sign of Sagittarius rising. Okay. But again, you are a Gemini rising. Now, what I find very interesting is this right here is Mars. Okay. Mars was just about to go over the horizon when you took your first breath of air. Okay. And that also has a very big influence on people. Basically, it means you're going to be more Martian. Again, I think for the most part, you are a solar run body. What I mean by that is the sun, solar. But I think you're also quite mercurial, which is, again, it has a lot to do with being intellectual. Again, the sign of Gemini is, the motto is, I think. But I think you might have a little bit more of a Martian. Mars rules over our physical drive. Mars rules over, also has a huge influence on our physical willpower. That gives you strength. Okay. That is very, very strong. Like the sign of Gemini, most Gemini risings are just going to be like, ooh, like kind of, again, it's very adaptable. And if you think about air, just the element of air, it doesn't want to be stagnant. It wants to be moving around. And that sign of Gemini just works so well. It's just this kind of, you'll notice if somebody's very, very Gemini, very, very, very Geminian, they're super, I'm going over here, talking to these people. Oh, and then I'm gonna go over there and talk to these people. And there's no judgment on, the style of clothes people are wearing. They're just sociable people. But whimsical. Okay. With you, I think it's a little more direct. I don't see you quite, I feel like you've got wit. I feel like you probably got wit as a Gemini rising with Mars on very close to your rising sign. But it's a little more direct and a little more, in fact, going back to the fact that you only have one cardinal placement, talk about right here, because all the zodiac signs, they are either fixed, cardinal, or mutable. Okay. And you only have one cardinal placement, which again, cardinal means force. Well, with Mars being just below the horizon when you were born, that does give you a little bit more force. Okay, so that's great for that. And actually, I have to put this on pause for just a moment because I think I'm getting a delivery and somebody just knocked on my door. I will be right back. Sorry about that. That was a package that I had to sign for, so I absolutely had to get the door. Okay, let's pull this back up. Now, we've gone through your sun, your moon, and your rising sign, and we've basically gone through the first house, the house of self. Now, it's strong. It's really strong to have Mars in your house of self, because Mars, he's ready to go. He's ready to take action, okay, within yourself. You might be a little bit competitive, maybe. I don't know. Maybe you might be a little bit athletic, but I also don't see you as somebody who wants to be out doing major competitions. I could be wrong about that, and I'll tell you why I said that when I get to that part of the chart. Okay, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this second house. This right here is the house of money, material possessions, and values. Now, please do not be concerned that you have an empty second house. It doesn't mean you're not able to have money. Okay. Basically can mean that money is not necessarily, a major priority. I mean, of course, finances are important. We live in this physical realm where finances kind of have to have some. But I don't see you as somebody who's going to be greedy about finances. In fact, I think you're probably, when you have a good flow of financial income, I feel like you probably enjoy nurturing people with that money. And that sounds like a strange word to use, but I'll tell you why I use it. Because it's really more about the zodiac sign that is ruling the house. Okay. What you have ruling your second house, this right here is a symbol for the sign of Cancer. Okay. Cancer is a water sign. That's why it's blue right here. So what that means is that sign of Cancer rules over the area of your life that has to do with your finances and your earning powers and your material possessions. And the sign of Cancer is a very nurturing energy. It's a very kind and compassionate energy. It also means that, okay, what rules this, and just to let you know, when it comes to money and finances, what rules the sign of Cancer is the moon. Okay. The moon rules the sign of Cancer. For you, the sign of Cancer rules your house of money. So what that means is wherever the moon is in your natal chart can have a lot to do with how you make your money. Okay. And this right here, again, going back to your moon is in the 6th house, which is the house of being of service. It can also have to do with physical health. Okay, so it's like somehow providing some kind of a service, and that sounds like you could say that about anybody, but it's just more prominent for some people than others. And I almost want to say that it's like it's may not come very easily, but if you are making your money doing something that's emotionally satisfying or gratifying, like, oh, this feels good to do this. It feels good to provide this service for this person. That is how you're going to make your greatest income. That's how being of service was something that makes you feel emotionally gratified. Okay. Because again, the sign of Cancer, it's an emotional energy, it's ruled by the moon. Okay. But it's also, please don't take this the wrong way, but the sign of Cancer is like motherly. Okay. And we all have the sign of Cancer somewhere in our natal chart. Even if we obviously, you don't have any planets in the sign of Cancer, otherwise they would be in this house. But we still all have all the zodiac signs in our natal chart, even if there's no planets in there. Okay. And that sign of Cancer is like the mother of the zodiac. Okay. So with that said, it's like almost a little bit, again, I hope you're taking this the right way. It's like almost like a motherly kind of energy with your finances, that sort of thing. But again, I'd say most importantly, and if you want to do any kind of like a vocational reading some point, I might go a little bit into that. I don't know what you do for work. But there are certain things that we can see in the chart that can finely tune how somebody can do well vocationally, okay, and monetarily. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Now moving forward to this 3rd house. This is obviously the busiest house in your natal chart. You got a lot. There's that Jupiter, the Sun, there's Mercury, there's Venus, all coming through the sign of Leo in this 3rd house. Well, the 3rd house is the house of communication. Seeing as though you are a Gemini rising, which is the sign of communication, and the rising sign is the lens, okay? And Mercury is the captain of your ship and is right next to the sun when you were born. And Mercury has a huge influence on our communication skills. And this all comes through the 3rd house, which is the house of communication. I would say communication is probably a pretty big deal for you in this lifetime. Something with communication. I feel like you probably like to be somewhat of a student. You like to pay attention to the facts of things. You like to, the reason I'm using that word student is because that sign of Gemini, part of the reason that it is a sign of communication is because it is the student who likes to pay attention to the facts, and then it goes around and it shares those little facts. Okay. And so whether it's something that you do for, financial compensation or just something that you do for your friends or your family, like being able to share messages with people is a huge part of your karma, especially if you do it with loyalty, coming through the sign of Leo, and doing it with courage, again, coming through the sign of Leo, or also coming through with like playfulness, leadership qualities, all of those things. That's a big, big, big part of your life. Okay, now moving forward, the 4th house, this is what we call the house of home. The house of home, family, real estate, property, can also have a little bit to do with your mother or your father. And what you've got ruling it is the sign of Virgo. Okay, this right here, where I'm moving my mouse, that is a symbol for the sign of Virgo. Okay, and it's green right here because Virgo is an earth sign. Where we see green, we know it's an earth sign. Okay, that's not going to be the case in all astrology softwares, but that's part of the reason I like this one, because it shows you all the elements clearly. Okay, so Virgo is the mutable earth sign. This is going to be, I'm going to talk about this sign of Virgo for quite a minute here, because this is where your North Node is in. And I don't know how much you've been following my videos, but the nodes are my favorite thing to talk about in astrology because they're so incredibly, massively important And they also say a lot about our destiny. Okay. So here we have that house of home, property, real estate, father, mother, being ruled by the sign of Virgo. Virgo is the mutable earth sign. When I say mutable, again, I'm talking about adaptability. So that's bringing you more. It's almost like part of your karma is to be able to break through the I want things to be consistent and persistent and stick with this rhythm. Part of your karma and your destiny is to be able to break through that and be able to adapt into new situations and that sort of thing. The sign of Virgo is the sign of being of service. It's the sign of physical health and being of service. I don't know if you remember me talking about this house, this sixth house, when I talked about your moon being up there. This sixth house is the house of being of service and also has to do with physical health. Okay, that's that house. But the sign of Virgo, two different things here. Signs and houses are different. The houses show the area of our life where things manifest. The zodiac signs, they modify energy that comes through that house. Okay, so Virgo being the sign of being of service and the sign of physical health does tell me that almost just puts more emphasis on the fact that I feel like it's really important that you find some way to be of service in the world. I feel like you'd be very, very, you would probably feel very rewarded and you would probably be physically rewarded. Now, also what's interesting here is that this right here is Saturn, which Saturn is the one who really cracks the whip on us. Okay, we all have Saturn somewhere in our natal chart, and wherever Saturn is, it shows where there's got to be responsibilities and discipline and almost a little bit of rigidness. Okay, again, not saying anything about you having to be rigid. We all have Saturn somewhere in our natal chart, and wherever Saturn is coming through, that's the area of the chart where he's going to require some lessons and some discipline. So what's interesting here is that this is coming through the sign of Virgo, which Virgo, even though it's super adaptable, it is an earth sign. All the earth signs tend to be pretty good at taking care of their responsibilities, okay? All the earth signs tend to come with a little more practicality. They understand the fact that we live in this physical realm and we have physical material responsibilities to take care of. And again, that's where your north node, okay, well, here's the north node. Up here is the south node. If you look, they're exactly opposite each other. They always are. They have to be. These nodes, they're not planets. They're points that sit on the moon's ecliptic, and they basically tie the moon's ecliptic to Earth. They're so important. They're what make eclipses happen. They're said to rule over the journey of our soul. The south node is basically our past. If you entertain the possibility of previous lifetimes, up here, your south node in Pisces would suggest that you already mastered the sign of Pisces from a previous lifetime. And in this lifetime, you're meant to develop more and more and more of the Virgo qualities, okay? And that's where the rewards lie. But again, so Virgo is a sign of physical health and being of service. But since the north node is fairly close to Saturn, about 4 degrees away from Saturn, it's almost like being of service in sort of like almost like a hardworking way, a very responsible way. It's part of your karma to be like, okay, of course you're a Leo and you want to have fun and you want to enjoy life and you want to go do all the things and you should. That's what keeps Leo's youth, because they're meant to enjoy life. But they're, without this, it's almost like too much having fun. It's almost like part of your karma here is to try to really hone in the responsibilities. And not only that, but this is coming through that fourth house, the house of home and property and real estate. If you don't already own your own home, you do have potential to, okay? Because I'm going to call this north node your point of destiny, but it's the whole darn chart is our destiny, okay? All of it, the aspects, houses, everything is our destiny. But this north node is like the direction that we're going in, okay? We're meant to sort of try to develop the qualities of the zodiac sign that our north node is in. And if there's planets right next to it, then we want to take those planets into consideration as well. So being of service, potentially having something to do with physical health, potentially even doing some kind of, doesn't have to be this, but it could even potentially have something to do with like working on a farm. Sign of Virgo has a lot to do with harvesting, like harvesting the fruits of the material world. And that could give you the potential to own your own home. Okay, now this could also, it's interesting now that I'm thinking about it. You have, if I remember correctly, and please forgive me if I'm not remembering this correctly, but if I remember correctly, I think you said you were a single father. And it's basically what's coming through here is that it's almost like you have to play the role of mother and father. That's potential for that anyway. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to manifest that way, but that's kind of the way I'm seeing it. The sign of Virgo is an earth sign, which the earth signs are a little more, they tend to be like, have like feminine qualities. Leo's masculine as masculine can get. Not only that, but Mars, so close to your horizon, is very, very masculine. But there's this part of you that's meant to experience like we all have masculine and feminine sides to us. We all do. There's no way around it. Some people are more masculine than others, or some people are more feminine than others. But we all have a little bit of both. And I feel like part of your karma here is to almost get in touch with that feminine side. And maybe again, even potential for playing the role of mother and father. Okay, now I hope that made sense. Let's move forward to the fifth house. So this fifth house, this is the house of children and creativity. Now, of course, this is going to have a relation to your daughter, as she is your child. But this fifth house doesn't only pertain to your children or your child. This fifth house has a lot to do with whatever we're creating for the world. Obviously, when we make babies, we're procreating. We're creating something and bringing it into the world. But not everybody has children, but most people have some sort of an opportunity to create something and bring it into the world, no matter what it is. It could be a book, it could be a piece of art, whatever it is. Okay, but since you have a child, then I would apply her to this fifth house. Okay, so what you've got coming through here is a sign of Libra. This right here is a symbol for the sign of Libra. It's yellow because Libra is an air sign. Libra is a lovely energy. It's a very charming energy. It's the sign of balance. It's the sign of harmony. It's the sign of relationships. Has actually a lot to do with justice and fairness in the world. It's represented by the scales. That doesn't mean that every single person who's a Libra is going to be super balanced and charming and that sort of thing, but a lot of them are. Okay, but what you've got coming through here, so it's like this lovely, charming energy coming through your house of children and creativity, but what you've got coming through here is Pluto. This right here is Pluto, which Pluto is sometimes referred to as the planet of power because Pluto does influence power. Pluto also influences very powerful transformation. He's the influencer of transformational processes. As I talked about the sign of Scorpio, it's like the sign of transformation. Well, that's because Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. Okay, so Pluto, this can manifest as you had to go through some sort of a very, very powerful transformational process involving your child. But it can also mean that in some way, shape, or form, you are empowered by your child. But it can also manifest as, that could show up in so many different ways. Your daughter turns out to be really powerful in the world, something along those lines. But it can also show itself as whatever you're creating for the world. And again, this could be anything, a piece of art or whatever it is, even if it's just words that you're creating for the world, whatever it is, that you can be powerful in that way. Okay, this could lead to potential for being some kind of an entrepreneur, because this fifth house is a lot of people who have a very, very strong fifth house. It's almost like if all this Leo energy over here was in that fifth house, you probably would have an incredibly strong drive to create something, you have a drive to be some kind of an entrepreneur of sorts. It's not like that because it's not a bunch of planets coming to the sign of Leo, but it is the planet of power coming through this level-headed, charming kind of energy. I think it is a really good idea for you to have some kind of a creative outlet because I think you might find yourself a little bit empowered through utilizing them. Okay, now the sixth house. So we already mentioned this. The sixth house is the house of physical health and being of service. And what you've got coming through here is that sign of Scorpio. Okay, which again, Scorpio is a very, very intense and powerful energy. And it's so you've got your moon in here. And again, you've got Uranus exalted in the sign of Scorpio coming through this house of physical health and being of service. That just puts so much emphasis on it's important that you are of service to some way in the world, whether it be to a neighbor or providing a service for financial compensation or just some way, shape, or form. I think it's really important that you are of service to the world in some way, because that's, again, you're going to feel emotional rewards for that. And it's almost like, I guess the best way I can describe it is it's just a pretty significant part of your chart. Taking all these things into consideration, that strong Leo energy, the fifth house being able to create something for the world, being of service, using your Mars energy in your house of self, being able to take action, but also using your communication skills. That and again, then being able to buy your own home if you haven't already bought your own home. If you haven't, I kind of feel like you probably will someday. All those things combined, that's a huge connection for yourself to I hope all this is making sense, because I think you might find yourself receiving quite a bit of rewards through like following through with what we see in the chart here. Okay, now the seventh house. So this is the house of relationships, partnerships. Let me make myself a little smaller here. Relationships and partnerships. Now, yes, of course, this can be applied to our romantic relationships, but that's not the only thing it is applied to. It's can be applied to any kind of relationship or partnership we have, especially if it's some kind of a contract, especially like if it's a business partner or an attorney or somebody that you have some kind of a contract with. That is what is going to come through this seventh house. So what you've got ruling the seventh house is the sign of Sagittarius right here, that symbol for Sagittarius. It is a fire sign. It's very fiery. And again, it's very adaptable. In fact, it's almost like I could see you having playful relationships and a lot of faith-based relationships as well. The sign of Sagittarius is very much faith-based, and it's kind of amplified for you because you've got Neptune coming through here. But I almost think it might be, and of course it sounds like I could say this to anybody, but again, it just seems like for some people, it just stands out more than others. Might be difficult to have a relationship that sticks. And as a Leo, I think you're very loyal. But this mutable fire, again, my teacher calls Sagittarius wildfire, coming through the house of relationships, sometimes it can be very difficult to make a relationship last the entire, adulthood, that sort of thing. Not always, but not only that, but this right here is Neptune. Okay, so there's some important things to say about this. So Neptune does make things confusing. It can make relationships confusing. And again, I'm also talking about any kind of partner, okay? Especially if you have some kind, whether it be a verbal or a written contract. Neptune can make things a little confusing. But what I love, okay, so Neptune influences mysticism and spirituality. Neptune is probably my favorite of all of them because Neptune influences things that break down the psychic boundaries. When somebody has a really strong Neptune in their natal chart, they tend to be very naturally spiritually tapped in, but also being able to tap into psychic powers. But with that said, that might sound a little confusing because it's like Neptune influences psychic powers, but at the same time can create confusion. But it's that confusion is because Neptune is so unearthly. Neptune is the bringer of dreams, okay? And that's coming through your house of relationships. And it's very, very faith-based. It's very beautiful. It's very, I do feel like you're very naturally tapped in with Neptune coming through the sign of Sagittarius, but moreover, this trine that goes to Jupiter in Leo. Okay, these guys, Neptune and Jupiter are really beneficial energies. Jupiter is, again, Jupiter's the great benefic. Jupiter brings the luck and the abundance and the wisdom and the philosophy. And because Jupiter is fairly close to your sun, I think you probably are somebody who enjoys things that are of a philosophical nature, but it's also it's creative, it's spiritual, it's mystical, but it's also a little fiery and a little revved up. It's almost like you probably get excited and almost an adventurous feeling in your heart when you're hearing things that are of a spiritual nature. And where I'm going with all this is that I think it's really important that you have a partner that you can share those kind of experiences with Neptune in your seventh house. It's almost like this chart screams that to have a relationship that lasts, to have a committed relationship that lasts, which loyalty and the sign of Leo, they just go hand in hand. But it's almost like it's requiring for them to be some sort of a spiritual attachment or connection, a very strong spiritual connection between yourself and any kind of partner that you may have moving going on in life. Okay. All right. I hope that made sense. Now, the eighth house. Eighth house is a tough house. It's called the house of death and rebirth, or the house of transformation. And it's actually considered a little bit of a gift to not have any prominent celestial energies coming through that eighth house, because that eighth house can have a lot to do with the tough things in life. The process of going through transformation generally does not flow, beautifully and gracefully. I mean, in a certain essence, it does, but for the most part, this eighth house is like one that will create the process of having to go through a breakup or go, like, somebody in your family or loved ones die when you're a young child. That's sort of the really, really heavy things can come through this eighth house. And that's why I'm saying it's usually considered a little bit of a gift to not have anything in that eighth house. Not saying that you won't go through some heavy stuff in your day. We all do to a certain degree, but it's not a major theme for you. Like a lot of people, just to give you an example here, let's pretend somebody's born with their sun and their moon in this eighth house. They tend to be somebody that has had to, they're 4 years old, their parents died, or they lose a child, or something like really heavy goes on when people have a lot of eighth house energy, and you don't. And in fact, what you've got ruling it is a sign of Capricorn, which Capricorn's an earth sign. It's very strong. Capricorn is practical. Capricorn, it's almost like when something really heavy goes on in your life, again, your moon is in Scorpio, so you process emotions very, very, very deeply. But at the same time, you can kind of get through those really heavy situations with practicality because you've got Capricorn ruling your eighth house, your house of transformation. Okay, now the ninth house. This is the house of higher learning and advanced knowledge. So what you've got coming through here is a sign of Aquarius, which Aquarius works beautifully in the ninth house because Aquarius is kind of considered like the genius of the zodiac. It's hyper intellectual energy. And coming through this ninth house, which the ninth house is actually like expanding the consciousness. Okay. The ninth house is it's like Rudolf Steiner studies or Alan Watts studies or something that is just philosophical, scientific, metaphysical, spiritual, all those things combined. That is the ninth house. Again, you don't have any planets in there, but that doesn't mean you don't get to have access to higher learning or advanced knowledge. It might not be like a major theme in your life, that sort of thing, but the sign of Aquarius ruling it, Aquarius is already naturally tapped in. It might even be like you already, maybe not necessarily know all the little details of things that are of a philosophical nature, but at the same time, there's this part of you that just kind of already knows, like, I don't need to be told that. I already know that stuff is going on. Okay, I hope that made sense. Now, the 10th house, this is the house of career and status and public life. Now, this is one I was kind of looking forward to getting into because I just hope help you understand this 10th house, because it's an interesting one we've got going on here. So what you've got ruling this is a sign of Pisces. This right here is a symbol for the sign of Pisces. Now, I'll say right off the bat that I am a Pisces and I love being a Pisces. Pisces is a wonderful energy, but I will say this also. that Pisces is not career driven. Pisces is a sign that's like the mystic of the zodiac. Going back to Neptune here, when I talk about how Neptune is the one that influences spirituality and psychic powers and that sort of thing. Well, Neptune rules Pisces. So that's why Pisces is the mystic of the zodiac. Pisces is detached from Earth. Pisces is the one that understands how much it's like the sign of oneness. It's the sign of, kind of like, oh, can't we all get along kind of energy. But it's not career driven. And so a lot of times when people have Pisces up here ruling their 10th house, it can be difficult for them to feel the drive for a career, or it goes the other way around, or it goes, they're like, oh my gosh, I really want a career. I just don't know what I want to do, that sort of thing. Or I tried really hard to go after this career and it just doesn't work out for me. It might not be in your karma to have some sort of a major career, unless, okay, now there's a lot more to be said here. It's almost like things that are contradicting themselves. Because, okay, this right here, this circle with the vertical line going through it, that's something called the midheaven, which the midheaven rules the career, okay? And not everybody's midheaven comes through the house of career. So again, this slice of pie is the house of career. And this thing right here, where I'm moving my mouse, is the point of career. It's called midheaven, but it's like the thing that rules over your own specific career. For everybody, that midheaven has to be somewhere here on the top of the chart. But when somebody has their midheaven coming through their 10th house, their house of career, they tend to be able to want to go after some kind of a career. But again, this is coming through the sign of Pisces. Okay, Pisces, I'm going to get somewhere with this. Just follow along. Again, keep listening here. This right here, again, is the south node. The south node is it represents our past, things that we already mastered from a previous lifetime. Your south node comes through the sign of Pisces. You're always going to hold on to that Piscean energy. I kind of almost feel like there's just this part of you that's already very, very naturally spiritually tapped in, maybe even from like a young age. Even if you might not be like a super hyper spiritual person, I don't necessarily see you as somebody who's walking around in a white robe and, like guru style, but I think that you just by nature accept things of a very, very spiritual nature, because it's almost like you could think of it this way. In a past life, you were that. You were the person wearing the white robe and, I don't know, playing the flute or whatever, some sort of a guru, spiritual guru, because your south node is in the sign of Pisces, but it's right next to, it's 1 degree away from this thing that rules over your career, the midheaven. So that's why I'm saying it's like, from a past life, you already had this major career energy. And I think you were probably it was something that had to do with spirituality or water, potentially something that really had to do with water. The sign of Pisces is very, very watery. But I would say for the most part, it was probably some kind of, maybe even a teacher of sorts that, taught spirituality or something like that. And there's even more reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on this is because this right here is something called the lot of fortune, the circle with the X in it. That's something called the lot of fortune. Now, this is where things get weird. The lot of fortune, wherever that is in the chart, shows where we can be fortunate. Okay, what area of our life we could be fortunate. So we've got the drain point, the south node, okay, right next to the lot of fortune, which, okay, you could think of it this way. If the south node is the north node here, again, these guys work hand in hand. The north and south node have to work together. Energy comes in through the north node and goes out through the south node. And they're in different places in everybody's chart. They're always opposite each other, but they could be anywhere in people's charts. For you, the north node's coming through this energy that says, okay, be of service, be practical, because it's Virgo. And then saying, has to be practical because Saturn's right there. And then you get to own your own home or your own real estate or property, potentially even some kind of a real estate agent. I don't know, something like that. But then up here with the career, the south node, the drain point where energy goes out, right next to the lot of fortune, that lot of fortune might be, speaking totally like hypothetically here, that lot of fortune is almost plugging the drain. It's almost like, okay, sure, he might have had a career in a previous lifetime as some spiritual guru. And because we don't want him to do that again, we don't necessarily want him to be a spiritual guru again. But at the same time, you kind of could be, because the lot of fortune is right there. In fact, and I really, really hope I'm making sense here. A lot of times when somebody does have Pisces ruling their 10th house, their career will involve some kind of a spiritual practice. And not only that, but the south node is also considered like the spiritual point. Okay, when somebody's south node is in the sign of Pisces, that's the spiritual sign and the spiritual point combining together, naturally spiritual. I have a younger sister who's got her south node in Pisces, and she's just absolutely lovely. Because she, even though she's a very grounded and practical person, there's this very strong part of her that just completely knows how much more there is to life than the mundane. Okay, so the north node's more like physical and material down here where I'm moving my mouse. That's physical and material versus the south node is more like detachment. Okay. And so all these things combined, if you wanted to have, obviously I've never met you. I don't even know what you do. I don't know nothing about any of that. But if you wanted to have some kind of a career in mysticism or spirituality, you just might be able to pull it off. But at the same time, I don't know that you're meant to do that in this lifetime. It really depends on how you feel about that. Because basically the south node and the sign of Pisces are not career oriented, but your midheaven that rules the career is in your house of career, and the lot of fortune, the thing that makes you fortunate, is in your house of career. So it's like, whoa, what is going on with all these energies? Okay, let me put it to you this way. Let's say you're just, you have some sort of a service position. You have some sort of a job, okay? If you were to incorporate some kind of, whether you were getting paid for it or not, let's just say any job that you have, let's say you're a waiter or whatever, you work on cars, whatever it is, work at an airport, whatever it is, with the people that you work with and the people that come into your work or whatever, giving them a little bit of your spiritual vibe, that actually might be able to help make you more fortunate. And when you do that, when you tap into that spiritual energy that involves the career, it's like you'd have to be really gentle with it. I think it would be strange if all of a sudden, if you're just a normal dude and all of a sudden you're showing up with all kinds of crazy crystals and beads and doing all kinds of weird hippie stuff, then people might be like, what's going on? But if you did it with just ease and grace and had a little bit of flow that came into it, that sort of thing, I think it would complement whatever you do for work and career. And not only that, but I also feel like out in public, let's say you go to parties, I don't know if you've done that anymore, but maybe when you were younger, if you go to parties, that sort of thing, you're probably, those people, when you're out in the public, they see your softer side. Of course, again, you're a Leo, big energy, but you have this like softer side to you when you're out in the public world, whether that be career or whatever it is. But I hope that makes sense. I really hope that makes sense because it's difficult to interpret. But again, if you follow through with this spiritual energy coming through the area of your life that rules over career and status and public life, something just popped up on my screen here. Okay, these red lines that go right here, that go straight up and down the chart, and those are called oppositions. And basically what that means is energy that's coming in through your 10th house it can fulfill what's going on down here in your fourth house. It can help you. It's almost like you got to find this like happy, healthy balance of being this, naturally spiritually tapped in person out in public, but bring that home into owning your own home and being able to manage finances and that sort of thing. So I really, really hope that makes sense. Okay, the 11th house right here. This is the house of associates and hopes and wishes. Now, what you've got ruling this 11th house is a sign of Aries. This right here is a symbol for the sign of Aries. Aries is kind of similar to Leo, but again, Leo's fixed fire. Aries is cardinal fire. Aries is the warrior. Aries is like more aggressive than like Leo. Leo can definitely be aggressive, but still, there's much more of a playful twist to the sign of Leo versus Aries is the brother sign. Aries and Leo are brother signs. Okay. But Aries is more like the warrior. Whoa, I gotta go be aggressive and I gotta be competitive and that sort of thing. In fact, Mars, going back to Mars on your ascendant here, Mars is what rules Aries. Because Mars is the most dominant, aggressive energy, that masculine energy that we receive from all those lights in the sky, and it rules Aries. That's what makes Aries again like aggressive and strong energy. Again, Leo's brother sign. Okay, so what that means is this: when it comes to your associates, when it comes to people who you're going to connect with for work or play, or say you want to have some sort of a gathering, some people together, especially people who are, you guys want to support each other's hopes and wishes. Let's say you want to stand up for what's gone on in Hawaii. You and your friends put together some kind of a protest to stand up for all that crap that happened in Hawaii and is still unfolding in Hawaii. You could definitely have a very strong vibe that comes out there, because that's where that strong sign of Aries comes through your natal chart, is in that area that rules over you networking with other people. However, I will say this: I don't think that you're somebody. Let me just peek at something in a different house system really quick here. Yeah, I don't think you're somebody who necessarily has to rely on making the connections and networking with others. Because, okay, just as an example, if somebody's born if they do have a ton of, say their sun and moon or whatever, sun and Jupiter or something are in the 11th house, then it's almost like they almost have to have that network of friends. They almost have to have that community to come together and make things happen as a team rather than independently. I think you can probably do things a little more independently, but at the same time, when it comes to the group setting, I think there's a little fire in you that can come out and kind of take hold. Okay, now moving forward, the 12th house. This is the house of karma and spiritual debt. It's a very, very mystical house of the zodiac. Has a lot to do with our karma, has a lot to do with our spiritual debt, has a lot to do with previous lifetimes. And what you've got ruling in is the sign of Taurus, which Taurus is strong. Taurus is very, very strong. It's the fixed earth sign. When we talk about earth is practical and responsible, and earth signs they tend to just be good at taking care of their earthly mundane responsibilities. And when it's the fixed earth sign, it's very strong. Taurus is the bull. So it's like you got this strong Taurus energy coming through your house of karma, which is great. But I will say this right here is Chiron, which Chiron is what we refer to as the wounded healer. Okay, now there is potential. Honestly, we kind of all have a healer within us. That's what Chiron's all about. We all experience certain wounds in our life. Generally, it happens at least once when we're going through some kind of early childhood development. Of course, for some people, it's going to be way more gnarly than others. But for the most part, we just all experience some sort of a little bit of a trauma. And that's said to be Chiron that influences that when it happens when we're children. And as we go through our life, we're offered opportunities to heal from those wounds. In fact, so here's Chiron when you were born. And since you were born, Chiron has gone around the chart all the way up here. Chiron is currently in the sign of Aries. So Chiron up in the sky, transiting Chiron, meaning Chiron up in the sky, has moved through the chart throughout your life. And as Chiron did that, it came along, it hit your Mars, hit your Venus, hit your Sun. And when Chiron does that, let's say here's your Sun at 9 degrees Leo. Let's say when Chiron up in the sky was at 9 degrees Leo, it would be beaming right at your Sun. And that's when something happens that gives you the opportunity to heal from those wounds from early childhood. And when we do, we tend to become natural healers ourselves. Now, that's what I'm saying. I think everybody's got a little bit of a healer within themselves as long as they work on their own wounds. But yours does stand out a little bit here because it's in this very naturally spiritual house, the house of karma, but it's still in this grounded, practical sign of Taurus. And this blue line that's going from here to here, that's a trine. That means these guys are getting along. Here's Chiron and here's Saturn. In fact, it's also kind of trining with your North Node as well, which, okay, to wrap this all up, it's like basically I do see a little bit of potential for you to work in some sort of the healing arts or sciences. Like I said, if you have any questions about, I'm not done yet. I'm still going to go through transits, and there's still some more things I want to point out. But if you have any questions on any of that, just let me know. And, maybe some other time we can actually connect through Zoom. But because I see this as somebody who does have a really good amount of potential, but it's probably hard for you to find. I think that might be something that goes on for you. And what I mean by potential, I'm talking about specifically the career and the public life, because this is so tricky up here in that 10th house. But I do think, again, I don't know, maybe you already are a healer. I don't know, but this stuff can support it up here. Pisces is a natural healer, especially if it's some kind of, you might have very strong sensitivities, all sorts of interesting things going on here. Okay, so I feel like there was something else I was going to say about the chart here. What else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I know what I was going to do. Okay, so what we just did is we went through your natal chart using something called the whole sign house system. If I just pull this up, you'll see this. House calculations here, you can see, and this isn't even all of them. There's even more house calculations we can use. What I've been working with here on your chart, the whole sign house system is like the most ancient system of houses in astrology. Now there's one that is very, very popular, and I have nothing against it. Personally, I understand why all the house systems can work. I understand why they all can. A lot of astrologers debate about it, like, no, it's only this one, or no, it's only this one. To me, I'm like, I don't understand. We live in this, like, there's so many things going on in every which direction. Why can't it be rational, irrational, and use both of the house systems? Okay, so when I flip this into something called a Placidus house system, which is a much more modern system of astrology than what we've already been looking at, but I still think it's worth looking at. I do it for my own self. I do it, look at it in my own chart. I look at all the different house systems with my own chart. And Placidus is probably the most commonly used system in astrology today. So click there. Now look what happens. Now all of a sudden, we see Venus and Mercury in your second house, your house of finances, your house of your own earning powers. And Venus is strong in Leo, okay? Now, this is, again, it shows me that there's potential for somebody to have a good source, a good flow of income, because see, Venus in Leo loves extravagance, especially in the second house. It's like, because Venus loves to be attractive, okay? And I feel like, yeah, you probably enjoy looking attractive. Who doesn't, right? But Venus, since Leo's like Leo's just got a strut about it. And then Venus she's just so lovely. And so Venus and Leo people, they can have this, they love nice things, okay? And when Venus is coming through that second house, the house of finances, Mercury there too, but Mercury is, again, more like mental function and communication skills. Might want to be using those communication skills for bringing in the finances as well. But this right here, this is something else I want to point out. So there's your moon in the sign of Scorpio, intense energy coming through the house of physical health and being of service, harmonizing these blue lines. They're not quite as thick as these ones. The thicker that these lines are that go through the chart, the thicker they are, that means the connection or the aspect is just stronger. Okay, when they're thinner, they're still there. They're still there. They shouldn't be ignored, but they're just not quite as strong. But there's the moon in the house of physical health and being of service, sending harmonious rays over to your Venus and Mercury in your house of finances. So that's another reason I'm saying some kind of a service position. So there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to process. But I just thought that I should definitely show you both of them. Okay, now I guess I'll show you this too really quick. So also using this other house system, now your lot of fortune, you're sometimes referred to as a part of fortune. The thing that makes us fortunate is in your ninth house, the house of higher learning, the house of advanced knowledge. So there's that. All right, now I'm going to flip back into the whole sign house system and we will look at your transits. Okay, so I'm going to go to the bi-wheel now. Okay, now what's happened here is the inner wheel, this is your natal chart. This is the exact same thing that we were just looking at, except now it's just smaller and it's inside of this bigger wheel or the outer wheel, okay? Like as an example, there's your sun and your Jupiter and your Venus and your Mercury all coming through that big old grand sign of Leo. But now they're just smaller and inside of this bigger wheel. The outer wheel, that is where all the planets and celestial bodies that are up in the sky, where they are right now in specific coordinates to your own natal chart. So just as an example here, let's start out with the sun. Here's the sun right here. If I say transiting, I'm talking about what's in the outer wheel and up in the sky. So for, again, an example, for everybody on Earth today, on what's today, the 27th, the sun is at 8 degrees Taurus for everybody on Earth. But for you specifically, this sign of Taurus rules your 12th house, your house of karma. So with that said, the sun is transiting through the sign of Taurus for everybody. But for you specifically, it's coming through the area of your life that rules over your karma. Oop, hold on a second here. Sorry about that. Trying to open my blinds a little bit. Apologies. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's just getting kind of dark out here. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Anytime the sun transits through the sign of Taurus, that means which every single year, the sign of Taurus is the end of April going into the first few weeks of May. That means the sun is activating your house of karma. That's a really good time to get an astrology reading because it's like you're starting to understand your own karma here. And just so you know, like if you see myself or any other astrologer talking about any of the zodiac signs, now you've got this recording. Okay, so let's say you hear an astrologer say, Pluto entered into Aquarius. Well, all you got to do is look to see where the sign of Aquarius comes through your own natal chart. In fact, let's just go back to just your natal chart for a minute here. There's that symbol for the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius rules your ninth house. So that means transiting Pluto up in the sky is activating your ninth house, your house of advanced knowledge. Okay, now let's go back to these transits. I'd say the biggest thing that's going on, this is really, really interesting. Okay, so if you remember, this is the 11th house. This is the house of associates and hopes and wishes, people networking together, people making things happen as they connect and make some sort of a community. In your natal chart, you don't have anything in that 11th house. You don't have any planets in there. But when we look at what's going on up in the sky right now, we've got a lot of energy going through the sign of Aries, going through your 11th house. That's where the eclipse was. That total solar eclipse we just had in the sign of Aries, that activated your 11th house. Okay, so what that means is it's like basically kind of all the way until January of 2025, January of next year, there's energy pumping into that area of your life. It's almost like even though you don't have any planets in your 11th house, I don't think you're somebody who's going to have to rely on making, a network of friends. I don't think that's something that is absolutely crucially important to you in this lifetime. It kind of is right. It is right now. It kind of is until January of next year. If this was myself in my chart, I'd be thinking, you know what? I think I should probably make some connections out there, a new group of friends, or if not a new group of friends, just hanging out with your friends. Something will come of it. Okay. Whether it be a new line of work or just new friends, whatever it is, new partner potentially. Venus is in there too currently, only for a couple more days, but that's what's going on there. Now, all right, let's talk about this really quick. So here is your natal Pluto. As I mentioned, Pluto shows us where we can be powerful, and your Pluto is in your 5th house, your house of children and creativity. Okay. When here's the south node, the transiting south node, the south node that's up in the sky. So remember that south node is the drain point, and we all have to experience it all the time. Okay, it's not like they ever go away. But wherever this south node is transiting through in somebody's chart, it's important to realize there's a drain point going through that area of your chart. And here we have Pluto in the planet of power in your 5th house, in your natal chart, and up in the sky, the south node, the drain point, has just gone over your natal Pluto. Has for a lot of people. I'm born in 1978. In fact, I can't remember the exact years. I think it's 1973 to 1981 or something like that. I can't remember the exact years, but our generation was born with Pluto in the sign of Libra. Pluto moves very, very slowly, takes a long time to go through a zodiac sign. So all of us, I'm experiencing this myself, just in a different house in my own natal chart. But we're all experiencing this year, okay, between July of 2023 and January of 2025. It's like a year and a half period where this drain point, the south node, is going through the sign of Libra, which for those of us with Pluto in Libra can almost feel like it's draining out some of our power. Okay, now clearly there's all kinds of other really good things that are going on. It's not like, oh my God, I just lost all my power. I don't feel powerful at all. There's always going to be good things going on as well. But if that is something that's going on for you, or maybe potentially there's something going on with your daughter that, is sort of like I can't remember, I think she was 17. Maybe there's a sense of like losing that connection with your daughter or something like that with the south node going through your 5th house. But overall, that will pass. That's a good thing to realize, is that will pass. But it's really the north node bringing energy in. That's where I always put my focus. It's like, okay, that's where the celestial energy is being supported already. I don't want to sit here and, barely keep my head above water focusing on where the south node is transiting through, because I'll exhaust myself. I want to focus on the stuff that's already being supported with celestial energy. So again, like making the connections, making a network of friends, and potentially people who you work with or just socialize with. Okay, now let's see here. I'm trying to figure out where I should go next. I think I'm going to talk about Saturn. Yeah, let's talk about Saturn, and then we'll talk about Jupiter. Okay, so this right here up at the top of the chart is Saturn. Okay, now Saturn for everybody is going through the sign of Pisces all the way until February of 2026. Saturn moves pretty slow. And Saturn in Pisces is not so great, because Saturn, again, if you remember, Saturn down here in your natal chart, Saturn's all about rigidness and wants a strict energy, wants us to take care of our responsibilities. And Pisces is like, woo, Pisces doesn't want to take care of responsibilities. Pisces just wants to, live freely. And, Pisces is just the mystical energy. And so Saturn's like, oh my God, I'm trying to be responsible here. And so it's kind of a tough transit for all of us. In fact, for some people, depending on how it's hitting their chart, it could actually bring out some pretty sorrowful energy, like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? What's going on in the world? Da, da, da. But for you specifically, Saturn is going through your 10th, because Pisces rules your 10th house, your house of career. So Saturn's going through your house of career again till February of 2026. Now, with that said, Saturn loves it in the 10th house. This is like his favorite place to be, because the 10th house is about responsibilities because of the house of career. Okay, so with that said, and Saturn takes a long time. Saturn takes about 29 years to go around the whole chart. So it's not like he's here very often. When Saturn is, it's like, basically, to wrap this up, where I'm going with this is that between now and February of 2026, if this was myself on my chart, I'd be going, okay, this is the time where I have to be responsible. I have to, for career stuff, I really have to crack the whip on myself, at least for the next, couple of years until Saturn's out of the sign of Pisces. I would be putting a lot of emphasis on career type of energy, maybe getting promotion or whatever it is. If you're trying to climb the ladder with work or get a new career or whatever it is, it's a good time to do that. And in fact, next year, if I look at, let's go with March 18th, or even let's go with March 19th of 2025. I want to show you this. There's a lot of energy up in the sky that will be activating. She's all over the place here. Will be activating your house of career. That's going to be Saturn and the North Node pumping energy in, and the sun will be in there late February to the first few weeks of March. The sun will be up in your house of career. I would be preparing myself right now. I'd be going, okay, next year, 2025, in late February, first few weeks of March, I know specifically there's going to be a lot of energy that involves career. Okay. And I'd be aiming for something now, how you want that to manifest. That's how I'd be setting the intention. I'd be putting the focus there. And also this right here is Neptune, which Neptune's dreamy and mystical and spiritual. I don't know how I do wish that you were on the other end of the call so I could converse with you and try and figure out like how to really bring this. It's a beautiful 10th house. Just maybe not so much for somebody who's like trying to be a construction worker or something. Not saying you can't be a construction worker, but it might be difficult for you to have that kind of career because there's a softer side to you when it involves career, even though you're a strong masculine Leo. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, another thing I think I should point out is let's look at Cancer season for you this year. Let's look at June 22nd of 2024. Okay. All right. So basically between approximately, it will change by a couple of days every year, but around approximately June 21st, summer solstice, that is when the sun up in the sky moves into the sign of Cancer. And what that means is, okay, when we go back to just your natal chart here, if you remember that the sign of Cancer rules your house of finances, rules your house of money. That's the area of your life where the sign of Cancer comes through. So when I go back to the previous transit here, when it's Cancer season, when the sun moves into the sign of Cancer, that means the sun's activating that area of your life, the house of money and finances and that sort of thing. That tends to be a time of year where we can have a good flow of income coming in when the sun is activating our second house, our house of money. Okay. And just so happens this year, and this is always going to be the deal. And please, I completely understand if some of this goes over your head. Again, just follow along as best as you can. But here's the sun, again, the transiting sun this year, when the sun moves into the sign of Cancer on June 22nd. I think it's actually on June 21st, but it's basically June 21st till about August 20th, that every single year the sun is going to move into the sign of Cancer and move into your house of finances. And when it does, see this right here is Venus, which Venus is never going to be too far away from the sun. Here's the sun, here's Venus. The farthest they will ever get from each other is like 2 zodiac signs away. Okay, they're all so basically where I'm going with this is that we know if the sun is moving into the sign of Cancer, well, that means Venus is already in the sign of Cancer, or Venus will be joining the sun in the sign of Cancer shortly after the sun moves into the sign of Cancer. And again, Venus loves extravagance. Venus does very well in the second house. And not only that, but as every single year when the sun and Venus and Mercury's there too, but Mercury just makes us think about money rather than being like, okay, let's have it, the financial flow come in. Venus tends to be more like, here, let's bring in some money. But every single year when anything up in the sky transits through the sign of Cancer, what it means is it's going to go tick, tick, tick. Everything in the zodiac goes this direction, just like we started with house 1, went to house 2, went to house 3, went to house 4. Everything goes this direction through the zodiac. Like the sun goes around here every single year. The moon goes around here every single month. Jupiter goes around here every 12, 13 years. Everything goes that way, unless it's in retrograde. If it's in retrograde, it goes backwards. Okay, so with that said, every single year the sun moves in here, and as it does, as the sun and Venus will go tick, 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 and move through your second house. Again, that is the end of June for the first couple of weeks of July. All these things are going to harmonize, send harmonious rays up to your house of career and status and recognition and your lot of fortune. Not only that, but they also, these green lines right here, they create opportunity. Anyway, so I guess what I'll leave this with is it's like they're creating opportunity with your North Node, your destiny, and your Saturn in your house of home. And so it's kind of, that will not every single year, but for the most part, the end of this June and going into the first, the end of June going into the first couple weeks of July should show themselves to be like the best financial time for you. And it tends to show itself a little bit more prominently when Saturn, who wants responsibilities, is going through our house of career. And as long as we're being responsible with those things, we're being responsible with ourselves, with our work. Okay, there's that. Now, okay, I want to also talk about Jupiter. Now I'm getting a little rambly. I hope I'm not boring you. All right, if I go back to the transits of right now, here's Jupiter up in the sky, who's been going through the sign of Taurus, meaning going through your 12th house, your house of karma. Jupiter's been going through there since May of 2023, which is good. It could be good for karma. Jupiter bring some good karma in. But what's going to happen next is Jupiter is in May of this year. Let's do that. I think it's something like May 21st or something along those lines. 21st, 2024. Yeah. Oh, no, a little bit further. Bear with me. Okay, let's go May 28th, 29th. Then all of a sudden, it's the end of May. Jupiter moves out of the sign of Taurus and moves into the sign of Gemini, which is great. We'll be there for a full year. Jupiter takes about a year to go through one zodiac sign. There's some flexibility there, but Jupiter takes approximately 1 year to go through a zodiac sign. And so you are a Gemini rising, and Jupiter is entering Gemini in May of this year. Jupiter is the great benefic. Jupiter brings luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy. Okay. And when Jupiter goes through our first house, okay, again, this is the first house, the house of self. When Jupiter goes through there, we tend to be able to experience some luck. We tend to be able to experience bringing in more wisdom. We tend to be, it's like Jupiter, the great benefic, is beaming his beneficial rays through our house of self. And he'll be there for a year, basically May of 2024 to May of 2025. That's great, especially when we look at Cancer season. When we're talking about thinking about finances and that sort of thing. So if I go back to Cancer season, And 29th will work just fine. See, then we got this stuff going on in your house of finances here, and you got Jupiter, the great benefic, going through your house of self, and Saturn's going through your house of career. So that's just great. Okay, I think I probably overwhelmed you a little bit already, so I will leave that there. I certainly hope that I made enough sense to you to where you were able to interpret, all this crazy astrology talk. And I will get this sent to you this evening. I hope you are well, and I guess we shall be in touch. Okay, bye-bye.